Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar brought to you by TechStrong and Yotascale. My name is Cody J. Brown, and I will be moderating today's session. We have an exciting presentation ahead, but before we begin, I have just a few housekeeping notes. First, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the discussion, it will be made available to rewatch. You'll receive an email after the webinar concludes with a link to access the on-demand. We want to hear from you, so please feel free to send in your questions at any time throughout the program by using the Q&A feature. We'll try to address as many questions as we can, so be sure to send your questions in early. We also want to talk with you using the chat tab, so let us know your thoughts, say a quick hello, let us know where you're calling in from. And finally, at the end of today's webinar, we will have a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so just stick around to see if you're one of our 4 lucky winners today. But let's go ahead and kick off our webinar. The topic today is cost visibility and optimization in multi-cloud environments, and I'm joined today by Jake Reichert, VP of Engineering at Yotascale, and Pedro Leonardo, Director of Product Management for Yotascale. At this point in time, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to Jake to kick us off. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks, Cody. Yeah, it's great to be here today. So just a brief introduction, a little bit about myself. So as Cody mentioned, I'm the VP of Engineering at Yotascale. Before this, I was previously over at a company called OneLogin, making security software in the single sign-on space. Prior to that, I was in senior leadership at Amazon Music and a number of leadership positions before that, both in terms of people management as well as in technical architecture. And, you know, one of the reasons that I think I've ended up at Yotascale is because it's solving a pressing need that I personally have experienced in my own career. And I'm assuming if you guys are attending this presentation, a lot of you have probably had similar challenges. Most of the time when I've looked at my company budgets, number one, expenditure is headcount, and number two is hosting services. Back in the olden days, that was more about rack mount services or rack mount servers. Now it's changed over to be more about cloud cost management. But this is really through my whole career, this has been a common thread that this has been a pain point. And up until very, very recently, the tools for investigation of this were pretty abysmal. The tools that were in the rack mount servers days were not as critical in some sense because you kind of had a fixed cost for the servers that you would buy. You know, whatever equipment you bought, you were capped at whatever you had purchased, and maybe you'd over provision capacity, but it wasn't unlimited. In a cloud environment, this ends up being really potentially challenging because essentially, without proper controls, your spend is unlimited, right? You know, for those of you with any sort of like a financial background, you know, this is almost like writing naked call options for you know, in the financial world. Like your losses in some sense are unlimited here, and that's kind of a scary position to be in. Now for most of us, you know, that probably isn't quite as pressing. It's not quite as dire as that makes it sound like. But probably many of you have experienced that sticker shock when one month you get your AWS bill and there's some charge on there for, you know, 5 figures that you had no idea where it came from and you didn't know about until it had actually happened. That's clearly not a position that developers, CIOs, finance directors want to find themselves in, of having to then go to your leadership and explain, you know, why you didn't have the visibility into knowing this really, really expensive event was going to happen. So I think that this is an area where developers, financial directors, CIOs, we all want to do the right thing, but just the tools are kind of missing to handle a lot of this and to actually get us that visibility. So I wanted to dive in here to a little presentation I put together to cover some of these points. What we're going to talk about here is how Yotascale, like what are the problems we're solving, how Yotascale serves to solve some of these problems, to really kind of dig in a little deeper on how impactful some of these issues are. And then after that, I'm going to turn it over to Pedro to actually dive into the product and do a deep dive so you can get a little more experience with what our product looks like, how it works, and how maybe it helps you solve some of the pressing problems that you have for your business. And then we'll leave a few minutes at the end for Q&A. So with that in mind, let me switch over to the presentation here. So let's talk a little bit about multi-cloud cost management. So Cloud expenditure, it's growing rapidly. It's growing really, really rapidly. 218 billion is the estimate for 2022. That's a lot of dollars we're collectively spending together on cloud infrastructure, and the number is only growing exponentially from there. What a lot of people, I think, don't focus on as much is just how much waste there is in our expenditures. And this is for both cloud native and multi-cloud workloads. So this is both what are you using in just one provider or in multiple providers now, as consumers are more and more getting into a multi-cloud universe, which we'll talk about a little bit more. By some estimates, there's 40% of capacity is wasted. This means that for every hour that your server is on, 40% of that hour is literally doing nothing. This isn't even when we're getting into the areas where you're over provisioning. This is literally just processing power that's sitting there idle. And so what we really need is business analytics that use a finance-based approach that is incompatible with modern architectures and engineering teams. Just isn't cutting it anymore. There's this top-down approach of saying you need to go in and cut your expenditures by 10% isn't fundamentally based in engineering realities, right? It's too top down. It doesn't give you any visibility into what's possible and what's not possible. And this is why we at Yotascale believe that a fundamentally different approach to multi-cloud cost management is required. You need a way to approach this in a way that is bottom up. It's engineering centric. It's with an eye towards how do you look at what your products are doing, and are you creating infrastructure that supports that, but not operating from such a place of fear that you over provision capacity just in case, and then I'm spending a lot of dollars that you really don't need to be spending, or don't even know that you're spending. So what are the challenges of cloud cost management? Well, there's several, right? There's modern cloud infrastructure. It's dynamic and ownership is transient. This is very different from the days when you would have a cluster of servers that basically was running behind a load balancer. You knew what all those servers were doing. It was very clear what department owned those. Once you get into something like looking at something like containerized workloads, it's very, very hard to know where those containers are running and what they're actually doing in terms of what percentage of those containers are running on what percentage of servers and what percentage of the resources of the servers they're actually using, or what's not being used. There's also a lack of visibility. Cloud spend, it's not linked to business and application context. There's a lot of times when it's difficult to know if you have a server that's just running someplace, what is that server doing? What does it mean? It's nice to believe that there might be a one-to-one mapping of a given server or a group of servers is doing one thing, but increasingly what we've seen is that's just not the case anymore. Certainly any of you that are running containerized workloads, you've seen firsthand that's just not how that architecture works. By definition, you have a pool of compute power that your workloads are running across that the business and application context gets lost, right? That model gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of where your services are running, having redundancy, but it then obfuscates by its very nature what those servers are doing and what workloads are running at a really granular level. There's barriers to teamwork that show up in this because there's no workflow for effective collaboration between finance and engineering. I've seen this a lot when I've pinged my network when I started working at Yotascale. CFOs or CIOs that I know. There's a lot of finger pointing that goes on because CFOs want to drive down costs. CIOs basically say they don't have the visibility to know about that, and it's going to take a lot of time and resources to figure that out. And then that's where a lot of teams end up leaving it. We think there's a better way to do that by building tools where these different stakeholders can collaborate on that and have a shared vision of driving down costs while not actually harming engineering team progress. Not surprisingly, a lot of you have probably felt this as well, that you end up with just very frustrated engineering teams. They want to do the right thing. I genuinely believe engineers don't want to over provision. They don't want to overspend. Engineers by their nature want to do things in an efficient manner. That's one of the things that makes us engineers. It's just the tools don't exist for them in many organizations to be able to do that. And that's where Yotascale comes in. So let's talk a little bit about what the actual price of this waste is, because I think all of us know that there's waste that's out there, but how much waste is there really? So between idle and over provisioned resources, $26.6 billion will be wasted in cloud spending in 2021. That's not processing that maybe could have been done more efficiently, like you had an algorithm that was running at some inefficiency that you weren't expecting. You could have written it more efficiently to reduce the amount of compute power it took. We're not even getting into that kind of stuff. This is literally, quite literally, servers that are just sitting there doing nothing, just turned on, you're paying for it, and you're getting no value out of it. Organizations will overshoot their public cloud budgets by an average of 24% due to lack of cost optimization. So any of you out there who are CIOs or CFOs, I'm sure you're painfully aware of this. You've got a budget that you've probably set for what you expect it, something to cost you, and then you overshoot it. But again, if you can't just go in and shut off servers left and right to bring down the cost. So this is just where things end up being left. Finally, 92% of enterprises currently have a multi-cloud strategy, but only 42% of those use multi-cloud cost management tools. So that means really only about half of the companies out there, a little less, that have a multi-cloud strategy, have any tools to back that up. They're relying on single cloud tools today and trying to piece it together in a piecemeal way, but that doesn't give you that full single pane visibility into what are my expenditures for a product or a team, especially if those expenditures cut across multiple clouds that you're currently playing in. These are designed for, so what we're doing is we want to design our tools for modern architecture.
Hey, Jake, would you like to run the poll?
Yeah, so let's interject with a quick poll here. So this is a good time to do that. So this should pop up on your screens here. So just curious, as we're diving into this and talking about multi-cloud plans today. So I'd love to hear from all of you about what are your company's multi-cloud plans. So let us know, are you already using multiple cloud providers, or are you assessing multiple cloud plans either now or for the future? Or is it something that's not really that you have plans for in the immediate future? Just love to see feedback from all of you on that. We'll get the answer back to that in a few minutes and see what you all said. Obviously, at Yotascale, our answer was yes. We're very much in a multi-cloud environment right now, and that's only growing as we move into the future. So, what are some of the things that we feel need to be in any product for cloud cost management in 2021, 2022 that are going to achieve some of those goals that we've talked about, driving down those costs? Observability is a really big one. This is kind of almost the foundation of where this starts. You need to have deep insights with business context. This is the important part. There's business context wrapped around any tool that you have. It needs to be able to tell you not just how much money you're spending or which regions you're spending it in. It needs to tell you which services are running in a way that they're costing either a particular business line that you have a lot of money, or be able to look at it on the lens of production costs versus staging environment versus R&D efforts. Maybe you need to divide it up along product lines. This is something where a product manager might want to see this sliced a different way, where they see which products are actually costing us a lot of money and which ones are essentially running for free. That gives you some really good business intelligence for taking back to your sales team about how they should put in place certain pricing options, or if there's certain products that simply you then look at and figure out you're never going to be able to make money on because they're so expensive to run. That's what we mean about the business context part of this, is having enough information built into the system so that at a glance you can see your costs divided not just along technical domains, but along business domains, to understand how much are they costing you. And then once we have those results back, Cody, you can feel free to just interrupt me and announce the results there. Predictability, that's another important one here. You want to really have a good way to streamline your budget and capacity planning. You want to be able to have a budget and live within that by saying, what does the forecast look like? How are you trending in relationship this month to hitting your budget or not hitting your budget, so that you can maybe go in and make some decisions, on the 10th of the month, if you start seeing things creep up and you need to bring it back in line before you end up, getting to the 28th, 29th, when it's way too late to do anything about it. You also want to have some sort of like anomaly detection here. So not just showing you the straight line graph, but actually alerting you to say, hey, wanted to let you know something funny is going on here. And you should pay attention to it. And finally, efficiency. You want to be able to get recommendations for what you should do in the future. Pretty obvious example here, like in the AWS world, is if you have a lot of capacity that's very expensive, how can you drive that down, right? How and where should you be using reserved instances where you're not? Maybe on the S3 side, where should you be using a different tier of S3 storage compared to what you're currently using? and basically doing things to drive down those costs in a way that are really more effective for your business.
So I've got those poll results for you.
Yeah, let's get those in.
So option A, we already use multiple cloud providers, had about 45% of the answers. And then B and C were assessing multiple cloud plans, and no plans for multi-cloud were both tied at 27% each.
Yeah, so I'll be honest and say, when I first started working here, I was shocked at the number of people that I started talking to said they were already multi-cloud. I really didn't think, I kind of thought like, well, maybe I'm the only one, right? I didn't realize there's so many people out there in the industry already who are multi-cloud. As we've dived into it, like we've just found that's more and more where we're putting our effort, because I know how much it matters to this audience and to other people like you. It's just increasingly becoming the reality for the new norm for people working in the cloud environment. So let's take a look at one of our customers here and how some of the drivers here for their costs. So Compass Real Estate, a lot of you are probably familiar with them already. Maybe even bought a home through them in some point in the past. And you can see here that their director of engineering actually says, overall, our engineers love getting into Yotascale. Our teams are finding inefficiencies left and right. And I think you guys have probably seen this with other tools that I kind of categorize in the sort of deep learning space that we're in, right? These are tools like looking at Sumo Logic for log file analytics, Datadog for looking at monitoring of your resources. So we kind of fill that same niche in terms of cloud cost management and expenditure. And I think that our job when we're succeeding is we do want our tools to be a delight to use for engineers. We want engineers to not find them painful and frustrating, but this is a way to actually help them, to enable them to do their jobs better. They have a pretty significant amount of expenditure, 10 million plus. The challenges they have here is that they want engineering leads and managers to be accountable. You can't really hold people accountable if you're not going to give them the tools to monitor those things. They wanted to establish cost in the context of Compass's products. What that really means is, making cost something that engineers are aware of. It's not just something that some other team is dealing with, that they're really thinking about how can they be building, again, these efficient products. And then for them, driving efficiencies given the pandemic's business impact. That's a theme I've seen a lot with my businesses that I've been in the last couple of years, probably some of you as well. It's kind of introduced some new norms that we've really had to pay attention to, either driving costs up or down, or customers up and down, just based on just the realities of how people's lives have changed due to COVID. Some of the results that they saw here, though, were self-service and accountability were what were driving these efficiencies. This was not top down of a CFO coming to engineers at Compass and saying, you guys need to be better at this. It was really the engineers having a tool that they could build into their regular software development lifecycle that actually made it easy and a pleasure for them to go and find these things themselves. And it was really just a win for everybody. So what we're really doing here is empowering engineers to make smarter decisions, right? That's what's happening at Compass, and that's what we're seeing across all of our things here that we're doing with customers, right? We've got insights into containerized workloads using Kubernetes, non-containerized, more classic style workloads where it's just running on a bare metal EC2 instance. And really one of the key points here is that the customer time to value here is measured in days, not weeks. This isn't something where you set it up and then you have to wait for months for us to gather this data. We start giving people actionable recommendations really pretty immediately. And we've had our customers routinely go in and find value in these products within days, and then continue delivering values for the weeks and months ahead. But you don't need to wait for weeks and months to start getting that data. It's something that you start seeing the value of pretty immediately. So taking a look at what's the competitive landscape like out there and how do we factor into that? So you have a lot of your first gen cost management tools. These are really some of the tools that were the first in this space a few years ago. And they're good at what they do, but they've got static custom reporting. They don't really have this sort of business intelligence view where you can slice and dice data in different ways. They deliver minimal system in business context. Again, that business context part we discussed is so important. And having that be flexible, having that be where engineers can go and just choose to tag things a certain way or slice things by how things are set up in their VPC or however they want to view it. That's really, really important to be able to view your data through multiple lenses. Our experience when we've pulled people is these tools just frustrate engineering teams, right? They're great for finance, poor for engineering. They don't give engineers that feeling of delight, like this is a tool they love engaging with because it helps them solve their problems. You also have the cloud native tools. So this is, as an example, things like CloudWatch inside of AWS. These are the tools that are built in to give you the insights on that particular platform. I'm sure all of you are familiar with these tools, and they are good at what they do, but the reporting there, it's pretty basic. The recommendations are pretty basic. In my experience, I've really needed to get more one-on-one insights directly from people at Amazon if I was going to get anything actionable. And I'm lucky if I can talk to a representative there once a quarter. So it doesn't give me that real-time feedback that tools like Yotascale do to be able to get that intelligence. And the tools like CloudWatch simply, they don't work at scale beyond a certain complexity of your application, and they're just not going to give you that deep insight that you're going to get from something like a Yotascale. Also, most importantly, of course, they're by their nature single cloud, right? They're not going to tell you about a workload that you're running across AWS and Azure. They're only going to tell you what's going on in your Amazon environment. And as 42% of you are already multi-cloud, I think you're probably already starting to feel the pain of those tools, so they can't get you that information. The last category is these things that we call point solutions. These are things that are going to only address a part of the problem space. As an example, there's tools out there that will instrument and give you visibility into the distribution or cost of your containerized workloads. But that's it. They don't give you visibility into anything beyond that. It's not going to tell anything about your database expenditures. It's not going to tell you anything about products that run across containerized and non-containerized workloads. That's a use case we've seen come up a lot, right? Let's say you're migrating a product from running on bare EC2 instances over to Kubernetes. You still need to see for the 6 months to a year that you're doing that migration, how much is that whole thing costing you? These tools simply aren't going to give you that visibility. And one of the things that I'm excited for our vision at Yotascale and what we're executing on is that we do all of those things, right? We will give you the insight into what's happening across multiple clouds. We scale to a very large level of complexity, and finally address the whole picture, not just a point part of the solution, like just your database costs or just your Kubernetes costs. And just a quick slide with a bunch of fancy looking logos here. You probably know a lot of these names. These are some of the companies that depend on Yotascale for their business operations. Zoom, Hulu, Klarna. You've probably heard of a few of the other names on here. And just before I turn it over to Pedro here, just wanted to quickly go through what this looks like for one of our sort of larger customers that we have here is Hulu. I'm sure all of you are familiar with Hulu. They've got 100 million plus cloud expenditure. This is a huge budget that they're spending in their cloud environment. And their real challenge is that, they are charging a flat rate to their customers. You pay however much your Hulu fee is, but that's a flat rate, and then you can consume an unlimited amount of bandwidth, right? Now that's both a compelling thing to consumer, but it's a tricky business operation to environment to operate in. As a PM or as an engineering leader, you need to build products that that they are going to be efficient, because customers can essentially consume an unlimited amount of material while only paying a fixed cost for it. Now, this was, of course, only exacerbated by what was going on with COVID, right? More people staying at home, more people streaming more things. And so I think that's kind of one of the things that's led to, Yoda or to Hulu really depending on us as part of the vital part of their infrastructure. You can see the quote here from their director of platform engineering. Yotascale is instrumental to companies like Hulu that rely on infrastructure as a critical backbone to customer experience, right? We've just covered some of the reasons why infrastructure is such an important part of Hulu's business, and keeping tabs on it is a key part of their business model. And the existing tools that they had, they were using Cloud Health plus AWS native tools. It simply wasn't solving these issues that they had on this deeper view into looking at how were their expenditures working across both containerized and non-containerized workloads. How do you drive a culture inside of the engineering teams of making sure that there is cost awareness? Again, that just comes down to having tools that are really a delight for engineers to use, that they can really get in and use them and quickly understand actionable things that they can do to make a difference to their cost basis. And the results here was a 6 times return on investment, right? Really, if we're doing our job, people aren't going to even think about how much does Yotascale cost, because it's going to return more value than you're actually paying for the tool. At the end of the day, by using a tool like Yotascale, using Yotascale, routinely what happens is customers just get a measurable amount of money back from the savings in this just wasted expenditure in the infrastructure than they're paying for the tool itself. And that's it for my portion of this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pedro, and he's going to go into a deeper dive on the product itself and give you a little bit of just a hands-on view of what it actually looks like to be using the Yotascale tool.
Thank you, Jake. So I'm going to move on then into giving you a demo about the Yotascale platform. So one of the things that customers find that is challenging is how do we actually map my organization, my business nodes into a hierarchy that makes sense for me to understand cost and do the allocation. So you see here that this is an example for a company called Acme Tech, and they divide the way they aggregate their cost is that they have the department level, like consumer services, data, development services, and then with that they have the different teams that run multiple applications, right? So to get to this level, right, the first step is really how do you look at the mapping? How do I normalize and deal with the complexity of tags and labels that are not cleaned up, right? So what we do is that we are able to normalize things like if you have something like an environment that are different types of ways of defining production and development and staging, we can define those values. So using regex policies, we have a situation here where the system ID, where there might be alphanumeric characters present. And so we can clean it up and say that I want to map all of that into an application, an application tagging or grouping here. Or if you have spellings like team might be written in different ways with capital T or with something else. We can also normalize all of them into something, let's say, owner, and define that, for example, this team with a capital T is really a mandatory tag for us, so that we are able to then run a report and tell you which resources do not have that tag. So this is really like one of the steps here to do the normalization. We do that at the service level as well as the container, the cluster level. And then from there, we will map that into the business logic. So defining the business hierarchy of which part of the organization. So example here at the AI and automation department, the automation tools, the advertise application, this is the actual definition of what gets put into that business context, and what is clean up to get as read, right? And we do have professional services to also help. Some people think, well, I'm really not very familiar with regex, so we can really make it easy for you to really create a hierarchy. So now where after all of that is done, right, we have this nice hierarchy here that tells me exactly, and I get to see the cost by each area. And once we have that business mapping done, we can give you things like this. Here you can see the cost, how the month is coming up. You can see the different departments here, the consumer, application, data, core partners, and you can see their costs and you see if it's going up or down. We also flag anomalies, and I will cover that later as well. But also we give you recommendations that are based on the context where we are. But before I go into optimization, let me still give you a little bit more information about tagging, because we do understand that this is a significant pain point. So when we go into this tagging report, you can see that Acme Tech is doing a pretty good job of assigning tags. So most of their services have the tags correctly assigned. There are a few that are not. You see team here is missing in some of them. So when I click there, it will give me actually the list of the specific resources that do not have the team tag, right? And then from here, I can make a selection and I can go and do a bulk update. And then I can add this team tag here and assign it to my team, for example. And when I submit that, it will assign and go and create these actually on AWS. It will go back to AWS to assign these tags. Or if I actually want to do it automatically, I can create this rule where in the future, I'm going to take a rule, like this is an example, where we took all of the missing tags for team and associated with the Jeff's team. and update this policy. So that means is that every time we see new resources that show up daily that have this missing tag, we are able to go and update those back on AWS using APIs so that the tags are correctly updated, right? Because we really want to get to the point where we do allow you to get the tags mostly associated with your organization, so that the mapping is done, and when you look at costs, those are very accurate, and they will reflect the actual costs that you have in your system. So, Julie, I believe that we do have a poll about tagging. I think this will be a good time to run it.
The poll is open.
Nice. It's open, okay. Okay, so while this is running, I'm going to move on into talk about the understanding the dashboard on how you get to data. I do have to apologize that my screen somehow is getting a little bit locked with sharing at this point. As you see here, I can see the data and I can see a lot of recommendations about what is going on, but the questions that people are going to have is, I want to know what is going on. So I want to know more details about how are the costs coming along and why am I seeing spikes in different places. And I want to be able to do that. So I'm going to show you here a multi-cloud view here, where when you get into the analytics, you can see that we have the organization base on the business logic, right? The business function here. We give you the breakdown of your multi-cloud, so Azure, AWS here, and then we show you the services, right? One view that you can do here is also switch over into a line view. And I can see that, for example, there is an increased cost here for the Amazon Simple Storage Service, the S3. And I want to know why this is happening, right? So I can double click on that. So our dashboard is very clickable so that you can drill down easily. You'll see that it's the production operations team that is running this S3 service. And as I start looking into the details, you will start to see that on my resource here, this is a general purpose usage. And it's mostly these two, this green and this blue, that are raising the cost. And that was because this team here, they changed the backups for this service for ClickHouse, which is running putting data into an S3 bucket. And you see that the costs are risen over time, right? So it's clear that these are the two ones that are causing the cost to spike, right? So this is how we can quickly go from a top view and start drilling down into a service to get that specific view about that service. And again, we are able to do, I'm going to remove this filter, but we do this drill down both across AWS and Azure, so you can see both of them. So what it means to us is that when I go into a specific area, let's say I want to look into production operations, we are able to bring the costs and show you the aggregated visibility across your different services, your clusters. Everything is coming into the different place, right? So you get to see both the multi-cloud visibility all in the same place, right? So it's all there. The other piece is, how do I deal with budget and forecast, right? One of the things that we have seen is that there is always a concern about how to deal with budget and forecast, and how do I get the visibility about what is going on and when things are going to go over budget. So we give you this view that identifies you where you are in this point and where are you going to land at the end of the month. And we want to be able to give you the opportunity to actually take a look from a different point of view. One is, what is my higher department level view? But also I want to see the different applications. So here I'm at the top of the tree, but I want to see which of my departments is actually running over budget and being the cause of contributing to that overrun, right? So that you can identify, let's say, the children. So it can be a team, it can be an application, and you get to see which ones are actually running over, so that you can go and talk to them, or you can go into the analytics to see the details of why that specific business unit or team is running over budget. Also, we show you the historical view, so you can see if you are typically over or under budget, so we can quickly go and reconcile those numbers and bring the numbers back to speed as you go and set the budgets, right? So here we'll be able to change the budgets. We also let you know if the parent has the correct budget when you look at the children. In this example here, you see that some of the different children or the different teams have budgets that don't roll up to the same to the top parent. So that means that the budgets don't add up. And this is important because if you look at complex organizations, it might not be clear that people are setting budgets in silos. So you want to make sure that they roll up to the total, so that the parent really is able to see, and then you can track it from that point of view. So, Julie, I think we also have an opportunity here to run a poll about budgets.
Would you like to hear the results of the previous poll?
Yes, please. So I do see that from the MultiCloud, Jake, that majority are either already in a MultiCloud, so 45%, and or they are assessing, about 27%. So there is a significant move into a multi-cloud. It's only 27% of the responders that say that they are planning to move to multi-cloud. And from a tagging normalization perspective, only 1/3, 31% believe that the tagging is complete. Majority believe that, so many of them believe that it is not complete. It's only 50 to 80%, and have no idea. So I would say that between 50 and 80%, that's where we have the core of the responses, about 2/3, and only about 1/3 of responders are not very clear about where they are. So from a demo point of view, I want to move on into recommendations. So as you see, people want to see and want to deal with specifics about what can I do to deal with recommendations. So we do have a different perspective here. We want to put things into context, right? So if I'm part of the data team, I get this report here, this analysis that is really specific. So I just drill down here into the data team. So now I'm getting very specific information about recommendations about what can I do to achieve 12K savings. But also, as I look at my budget and spending, I do get to see specific things like anomalies, right? In this case, we see that the data team is finding a sequence of anomalies. And an anomaly here is, for example, that the Redshift service is increasing. And what we do is that we baseline your cost for the last 1 week, and we compare the same day of the week to the previous one, and we flag it when there is a significant cost, right? And we allow you to give you like additional details of exactly. So you see this one here, it's a Redshift service. You can see the application. You can see the owner, it's the Lakehouse team that is running this one, and you can see the increase in cost, right? So as you see the big shift, like from one day to the next, from $2,000 to $7, like almost a 5K change, then you can go and talk to the team and see if that makes sense and it's something that they need to take an action about or not. We do allow people to actually give us feedback, right? It might be that you find that, well, I don't think that recommendation applies to me, or it is actually not an anomaly. or I want to assign it to someone, right? So this is how you are able to actually let us know. So that's where the humans can help the machine with the machine learning in identifying what actually accounts for a valid anomaly or not, or I don't want to be bothered. So we take that across the board, where every time we give you a recommendation, we make it actionable, right? We always want to make it very actionable. So provide you the insights about what it is, but also take an action to either assign it, hide it, or define it as not an anomaly, so that you don't have to deal with it again. So this is the anomaly point of view. I want to now show you some of the recommendations as well that we have in place on how we can optimize costs. So let's say that you have here this consumer app, and you see that there is a lot of opportunity for saving. So I'm going to look at one specific recommendation for right-sizing EC2, which is a very common situation, is that teams do set up services that run over time, but what happens is that they might actually not be using all of that capacity. So what we do is that we give you that recommendation, right? We give you multiple options if there are multiple options. So one option here is to move into an M5. So M5 is the next generation from an M4. So it's pretty straightforward. The savings are not significant. It's only $89 a month, but you can see that within that change, you will be within the same CPU, so we'll not have an issue if you move to this service. You will be perfectly fine. If you want to be a little bit more aggressive, we give you like another option where you might want to be a little bit more aggressive in savings and save almost $900 a month. But that means that there could be a few cases where the CPU might spike and it might run over. So then you have to make a call. Is this a service that will be very impacted if actually there is a CPU spike or not? But the savings are pretty huge, right? Pretty significant. So you can then take an action. So this goes back to the idea that I was talking about on how to make decisions actionable, but also be insightful, right? Providing the person with the right information to make that choice. And then from there, you can take an action. The actions that we do here are actions at the Yotascale, where you can tell us if you believe that this is a valid recommendation, or if this indeed is not really a good recommendation that you don't want to act upon right now. So you can let us know here, or you can connect you back to the AWS. One of the things that we are not doing, just as a disclaimer, is that we are not going and doing the implementation of the recommendation on the AWS console right now. We do click and send you there, so there is an option to open the AWS console. But the reason why we don't do it is that a lot of companies they have a different process on how changes are done. So we want to be mindful that that is a tricky space, right? So we focus more on tell you what it is. You can hide it for a while, come back, look at comments. But you can then, with a quick link, go to the AWS console, and then from there, you'll be able to take that recommendation, right? So we'll be able to do it from here as well. So these are some of the recommendations about right sizing, right? We also do that for RDS and terminating instance. The other section about recommendations that I want to highlight is global types of recommendations that you want to do at the savings plan, right? And we do understand that you can go to AWS and implement your savings plan directly from there, but we wanted to make it more actionable and more insightful on how to make the decision. So you can play around here with the data to say, I want to use a different calculation. Maybe I want to use the last 1 month to get data for my decision. I want to maybe do a 1 year or 3 year, depending. Maybe 1 year is good enough for me. I don't necessarily want to do a commit for 3 years. And I'm okay with some partial savings, but I can also change the number myself here, and I can put a different number here. And then I can add that option to my comparison here. And so here, then you're going to see over a period of time, this is a period of a month, you are going to see the different options here and how much you would be getting in terms of savings if you were to take that decision here, right? And comparing this side by side, again, it makes it's really a very good way of you getting to know the details of which one is going to be the one that really is more meaningful to you, because you can see that the savings are significantly different, but also you have to deal with the fact that how much are you going to incur in terms of cost upfront versus not as well, right? So it does give you that perspective and comparing them easily side by side. And then from here, again, you would connect to the AWS console here. Just want to see if I can log in to show you, but you would take you there so that you would be able to then take that recommendation and implement that there directly from here, if you were able to take that and wanted to do it yourself, right? So these are the recommendations that we can do from here. We also have additional recommendations that we do from a RI perspective as well. So you can also get recommendations on how I want to implement RI. And it is another option here where we give you those as well. So we do give you many options on how you can implement your changes. So here you see the number of utilized hours over time, and what would be like a recommended, a good amount of the number of RI instances that you should get to those savings, and we'll give you the full detailed information about how to get there. And again, with the like our kind of logic that decisions should be based on real data and meaningful, insightful data, so that when you're making a decision, you'll be able to actually make the right choice based on the recommendations that we provide you. The other thing I just wanted to really highlight is that we do this, again, at the service level, but we also give you all of the visibility from a container point of view, right? I wanted to go back here for a second and show you that the value of showing the clusters as well is that we bring it all into the table. And again, we are bringing the AWS, so you see ECS, there's EKS as well that we support, but also AKS. So we are able to combine both labels as well as tags and account subscription to really bring it all together from a perspective of how to get to the visibility that you need and the recommendations that you need to actually get the savings implemented in your network. So I think we're getting to the last 10 minutes. So we'd like to go and open it up to recommendations. I just want to go back to the polls and give you the results for the budget. So it does feel that a majority of companies are pretty good at keeping with the budget. So 57% seem to be doing very well in terms of keeping with budget. There's only a few, like about a third, that are struggling more with the budget and forecasting at this point, which is great. It's good to see that majority are keeping things tightly under control.
Yeah, you guys are an interesting crowd. I think this is not usually what we get in response to this poll. So, pat yourselves on the back for doing that already. I think this is where some of the other tools that we have become useful for people like you who are a little more savvy, experienced, maybe advanced users, if you will, being able to get some of those deeper insights about recommendations about, well, now that you're just being able to live within your budget, how can you then use tools to then drive down costs even further and use that money towards hopefully even better things like hiring more engineers.
So we have begun receiving some questions. Would you guys like to open up the floor? All right.
Yeah, sure.
Our first question is, what clouds does Yotascale run on?
Yeah, so a lot of our processing is predominantly on AWS, but we also run some workloads on Azure. And I think that we are our own first customer. We use our own product kind of relentlessly to figure out both solving our own business problems that I need to, being responsible for my team's engineering budget, but also, of course, trying to make sure that it's really the right product and solving real problems. So, it is flexible enough that one of the things that I'm constantly looking at is, well, what does it make sense to run on AWS? What does it make sense to run on Azure? And moving workloads around as basically we are able to better improve our systems and operations to optimize our financial structure.
All right. Our next question asks, does Yotascale support both big and small customers?
Pedro, yeah, you want to talk a little bit about some of our customers?
Yeah, we do have quite a lot of very large customers, as you saw, like Hulu, Zoom are pretty large, but we also have smaller ones. I would say that where we would provide more value is when you are spending at least $2 million a year in cloud cost. That's why when the savings become more important. If you are spending only a few dollars a year, although you could get some recommendations, those are not going to be so meaningful to you or even to us, right? If it's a very small amount. But once we get into a $2 million spend a year, definitely the recommendations will really be very beneficial because you can start getting significant discounts.
Yeah, the other thing I'd say is that's true. There's also cases where we have customers who are smaller who maybe have workloads that are a lot spikier. They don't necessarily know what their performance characteristics are, but there's not just like this straight line growth. That's another case where we've seen success is customers who kind of use it for some of those areas around recommendations or forecasting when it's not necessarily straightforward to be able to just look at your cloud native tools and have it tell you the answer to those questions. But yeah, good question. I'd say it's a lot of it is based around the amount of your spend. Clearly, the more you're spending, the more we can save you with your cloud provider, but also the complexity of your workloads. Customers who have more complex workloads with trickier performance characteristics, a lot of peaks and valleys. Those are also places where we've helped customers regardless of their size.
Our next question asks, is Yotascale cloud agnostic?
So if we're talking about can we run it anywhere today? No, it's unfortunately this requires a lot of deep instrumentation with the particular cloud providers. So a lot of the backbone of this comes from us ingesting data files from the cloud providers that we then use to populate our database and our BI tools. And those processes just look different from provider to provider. So for each one of them, we do need to go in and set up custom integration. As of today, we already support AWS and Azure. Early next year, we'll be supporting GCP as well. That gets us to about 70% of coverage of the market. And then opportunistically after that, we'll look at instrumenting some of the smaller guys as well, just based on what our customers are looking for.
And in average, what are the savings for a medium or large company?
Let's see. Pedro, do you happen to have any numbers on that at the ready?
The savings, we often have seen savings that if you actually implement all of the recommendations, you would save over 30% for some of these larger companies. The thing is that it's not always just because you have a good recommendation and all of the data matches, it doesn't mean that people are going to follow the recommendation. It's like as many other things in life. I think it mostly depends really on how a company is looking at budgeting and planning. And if they have a specific program where they really want to get to the bottom of their cost savings and they want to optimize for Any reason can be for reducing costs, can be for profitability. So it totally varies from company to company. Companies that are still on a very high path of growth, like as you see some of the companies, the savings are important, but it was not a main aspect. So I would say between 10 and 30% are usually where people land, depending on how aggressive people want to be or not. And sometimes people have a program where for a quarter they want to go and do a lot of savings, but then they let things run for a while until it starts growing again out of control, and they come back. The best recommendation is actually that you make it part of your development cycle, so that engineers are empowered to make the right choices. They have the right information. So then it's not really a burden that you have to come back later and fix it. You actually get the data upfront, and you get used to actually understanding cost and look at recommendations while you are actually doing your development and doing your deployment into production, right? So that you make the right choices there, so that it never becomes a burden where you have to come back and deal with a spike because things were not planned around. So we do try to empower companies to be more proactive about making the right choices as well.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think that as with any of these sort of other business intelligence tools for technology platforms that you might be familiar with, like Sumo Logic or Datadog, the more you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. Just the more deeply that you're engaged with the tool, the more value it'll continue to deliver for you. A little of that is, we provide a lot of really good, hands-on training to people when they start using the tool, so that they have a good sense of what are all the levers they can pull to get the information out of it. I think there is this baseline of information that you get from not putting too much work into it, that it's already going to pay for itself. But then, beyond there, it's as Pedro said, it's really about kind of how much time you're able to invest into building the intelligence from Yotascale into your software development life cycle, and carving out time to execute on some of those recommendations that it's giving you. And what we've seen is those recommendations are not, it's not like you install the software, you get the recommendations, and then after that, it's like, what am I paying for this software for? It's not telling me anything new. We've actually seen it continues to give actionable recommendations to people. Our customers have workloads that, you add a new product line or you change a piece of code, and the algorithm for doing something different, something that was previously done using a statistical model, is now moved over to a full ML system. So any of those engineering type of changes people make impact the cost of your cloud compute expenditure. So baking this in as part of it, like looking at other non-functional requirements like latency or throughput on an application. This becomes in a sense another non-functional requirement that teams can start looking at as part of their planning cycles and making sure that they're meeting the objectives that the company has set or that they've set for themselves.
All right, well, outstanding. That seems to be all of the questions that we have received so far. So I would just like to take the time to thank Jake and Pedro for taking the time to be with us today. Any questions that you might send in these last 2 minutes, they will get forwarded over to the folks at Yotascale, and they can answer those for you after the webinar concludes. A quick reminder that today's session was recorded. Following this webinar, you'll receive an email with a link to access the recording on demand. You can also find the recording living on the DevOps website. So just visit devops.com/webinars and look in the on-demand section. Now to announce the 4 winners of our $25 Amazon gift card drawing. Our first winner is Steve W. Our second winner is Amel B. Our third winner is Daniel P. And our fourth and final winner is Mallory C. So congratulations to the 4 of you. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim your gift card. And if you don't receive an email, just check your spam folder. Again, Jake and Pedro, thank you so much for taking the time to put together this program. And I'd also like to thank you, our audience, for being with us for the entirety of today's presentation. This is Cody J. Brown signing off. Have a great day, everyone.